As you can see right here, the Bombard crossbow is white, which means it's a normal item, and you can see the damage, you can see the critical hit chance, the attacks per second, the reload time, which level and also which attributes it requires, and then you can see a special thing on the item. This is called an implicit. They are always present on this specific item, so a Bombard crossbow will always have the implicit of grenade skills, fire an additional projectile. But in endgame there is probably going to be a way to change that. That doesn't have to scare you right now. So if then this base item is an upgrade for you, you can start using currency on it. We do have a good example here in the endgame content reveal, where an Orb of Transmutation is being used on the crossbow. This has now turned the item into a magic item with one modifier. So this is going to be extremely powerful early on, and you should definitely do this very often to your items in case the base item is better than what you currently have equipped. So you can actually now take this item and make it even better with the corresponding orbs. So next we are actually going to use another orb in the showcase here, which is the Orb of Augmentation. This one is going to augment a magic, speak blue item with a new random modifier. So now when applied to the crossbow, it is going to add another affix to the item. Very important here is there is a distinction between prefixes and suffixes. This doesn't have to do anything with implicits, but it's basically just dividing the pool of possible outcomes on that item. So there is going to be different pools for different items. So for example, boots will have slightly different suffixes than a bow, for example. The same applies to the belt and the boots, for example. But you don't really need to learn all of these prefixes or suffixes. It's just really important to understand that there is going to be one prefix present on the crossbow right here, and there is also going to be one suffix present on the crossbow, because magic items can only ever have two affixes, not counting the implicit. So if this is being applied right here, you can see we have now added a prefix, which is the higher one. There is also a nice little graphic that I have screenshotted right here, where you can see way more information. This is probably going to be enabled not by default. So you have to go into your settings and then find something like full description or more item tooltips. Something like that is going to enable the menu or the information that is super important that you can see right here. Namely, you can see what I've already been talking about in the item, on the item itself. As you can see, there is the implicit. This is the armor right here. We're looking at a belt. So this plate belt right here, for example, has the implicit of 100 to 140 to armor. So depending on how lucky you are, it is going to roll between 100 and 140 for armor. And this is always going to be present on a plate belt. Then further down below the yellow line that you can see right here, there is going to be two prefixes highlighted by the menu here on the side, where you can see that the item also gives you armor and maximum mana. Then come the suffixes on the side here as well, and these provide the increased charm charges gained and cold resistance. It's just important to understand that the magic item can only have one prefix, one suffix, and the rare item in this case can have up to 6. This means they have 3 prefixes, 3 suffixes, and the implicit doesn't have to do with anything of the amount of stats present on the items. There's also another thing. Every prefix or every suffix can also roll in a specific range. So there is going to be a very unlucky roll and there is going to be a very lucky roll. We can see both of this also present on the item right here. You can see the armor roll right here is T9. So actually a very, very lucky roll on the roll range of the item. So if this would have been T1 instead of T9, we probably would have gotten around 100 armor or so instead of these 246. This T9 can have a roll range between 226 and 259 in this tier. Then we can also see a tier 7 roll for the maximum mana, which again is also more on the higher side. And also just looking at the tier of the affix, more desirable than, for example, the tiers on the suffixes. As you can see, the tiers on the suffixes, the person crafting or finding this belt has actually been a little bit less lucky on the suffixes because they are T2. As you can see right here, the numbers are instantly way lower. Obviously, it's also a different form of attribute, but still. If this was T9, this would probably be around like 25 or so %. But it's actually T2, which makes it roll between 11 and 16% for the increased charm charges gained. Then we also have T2 Res or T2 Cold Res, which rolls between 11 and 15. And this item actually has 13 cold resistance on the suffix, which makes it a T2. Memorizing what tier can roll how much is absolutely not mandatory. What's important here is though, as soon as you find an item and you are checking if that is good, if the numbers here on the right are more on the higher side, it is generally going to be a much better item compared to something that maybe only has 2 affixes on them or just T1s. But that is not always the case because obviously the stats that are present on the item, the prefixes and the suffixes, also need to be applicable to your build. So the tiers on the side are not just, oh, higher tier, better item. This is not how this works. You actually obviously have to fit the items still to your build and actually play into your strengths or maybe your weaknesses of the build by trying to cover your resistances, for example. After making the item magic, there's actually a way to make it rare, and with what we have learned just now means that we are going to open up more prefixes and more suffix possibilities to actually improve further on the item. And this is being done with the Regal Orb. So if, for example, you are really happy with the outcome of the crossbow right here and everything fits your character perfectly or is an upgrade already, then you are going to use the orb to make the item rare. What has happened now is that another prefix has been added, namely the fire damage right here, and it is now rare. And the good thing about making the item rare is that you are getting rid of the 2 affix restriction that a magic item has due to turning the item rare, because rare items can have 3 prefixes and 3 suffixes, opening up the possibilities of making the item even stronger. And this is where the next currency comes into play. This is called an Exalted Orb, and this adds another modifier or another affix to your item. Now, looking at the item, we see that we have 3 affixes. It doesn't really matter if it's pre or suffix. We just know that we can still add 3 affixes on the item with the Exalted Orbs. So this is going to happen now. When you throw it on there, you can see now it has also gained 5 life per enemy killed, which is not really the best stat, but definitely not bricking the item or so. Then we are applying another one. As you can see right here, now it has level of all projectile skills, which is huge. It is going to deal much more damage because levels on your skills are extremely important. Then we're going to add the last Exalted Orb, and it has added the 81% increased elemental damage with attack skill. Using the Orb of Transmute, Augmentation, the Regal Orb, and the Exalted Orb during the campaign is extremely important because you might actually have the idea of saving up these items because this is actually how you trade with other players, but you will struggle a lot during the campaign if you hoard these items. Make sure that you are using all of these 4 every time you think you could actually create an upgrade for your character. And if you actually successfully upgrade your gear by crafting on it, then you are actually going to feel much stronger going into the campaign bosses. This actually makes a huge difference in terms of player power, and it not only works on weapons, so it also works on helmet, it also works on literally every item that is present on the inventory. Even these two right here, the Orb of Transmutation and the Orb of Augmentation, these blue ones, they are even usable on your flasks. So if you find an extremely high level flask that is normal, you can still make that have two affixes, so magic, with the combination of the transmute and the augmentation orb. So it is going to be detrimental to your success that you are using all of these orbs, and there's going to be much more stuff that you can do later on. But for now, it's actually really important to internalize using these orbs. Another feature is the disenchanting of items that you either no longer need or you have found and don't want to sell. If you are sitting fairly comfy on the gold or you need to create another orb, you can disenchant items. So as you can see right here, after talking to the vendor and not selling but disenchanting, you will be opened up with this menu where you can now start disenchanting your items. This magic item right here is giving you a transmutation shard. So after disenchanting enough of these items, you are actually making an orb yourself. You can also salvage rare items, and as you can see, it disenchants for something else. In this case, a Regal shard, which you know is extremely important because it allows you to make rare items in the first place. And another feature that hasn't been present in Path of Exile 1 is the Salvage Bench. A very important feature to use because it can actually help solve your resistance issues and actually buff your damage. For this, you are actually going to go to the Salvage Bench, which looks like the Act 1 area. Then you can actually salvage items that currently have a socket on them. So this short bow dropped with a socket where you can put runes in that are either going to buff your damage or buff your resistances, depending on if you put them into weapons or put them into armor. And by salvaging the items that have a socket present, you are going to get these Artificer's Orb shards, which are turning into an Artificer Orb when you have 10 of those. And Artificer Orb is basically the itemized version of applying a socket to a weapon or armor. This is going to help you out tremendously in the early stages of your character's progression because these runes are actually extremely powerful. For example, the glacial rune socketed into the helmet right here is giving the item plus 12% cold resistance, which is extremely helpful throughout the campaign. So if you're finding these items with sockets, definitely go back to your salvage bench when you have a couple of them and salvage them until you actually get your Artificer's Orb, because this is going to make it extremely strong. There's also another feature present on the salvage bench. For example, you have an item that has plus 16% quality. In case of wands, this is increasing the quality of the provided spell from the wand itself. But if you salvage that, you are going to get itemized quality upgrade for your items. So as you can see right here, when you salvage a quality weapon, you're going to get blacksmith's whetstones, and then for the wand there is going to be other items that you can then use. All in all, crafting is one of the most important things to increase your character's power and also defense, making it much easier to go through the campaign. If you are stuck in a campaign boss, check your items, check your orbs that you have available to you. Maybe you can fine-tune an upgrade or so. Maybe you can socket a new rune into an item, or maybe even apply a socket in the first place to an item. This is going to help you out tremendously if you keep doing this throughout the campaign. The amount of currency drops has been increased tremendously, according to Jonathan Rogers during the endgame reveal. And this makes it even more important to use all of the currency available to you throughout the campaign and also into the late game. There is much more Path of Exile 2 content coming up, no matter if it's build guides or general game guides. I am blasting the game as much as I can throughout the early access stage. So there is much more to come. If you want to see how all of this is being discovered live, then I suggest you check out the Twitch. That is going to be linked down in the description below. And if you like content similar to this, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel, and I'll see you next time.